Matt, we're so glad to have you on, man. I already know that your inbox, since dropping that newsletter, has just been filling up with requests. You've been on Feinbaum, you've done multiple appearances. This is probably the best place to start. What can you tell us that will keep you from going to EA jail about College Football 25?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be doing things like this. It's a pleasure to be talking about a story that's, I think, a fun reprieve for my beat, because a lot of what I end up writing about, kind of joke about with ADs and administrators, it feels like the apocalypse beat, right? You're so focused on existential crisis and enormous changes, from one thing to another, and the video game is fun. What I can tell folks is that I've learned more information about who is going to be on the cover of the game, which is one of the questions that I get asked. I have been being asked, for months. People are very curious about it. One of the things that I can share is that the individuals that are going to be on the cover of this game, and there's more than one cover, are going to be current athletes, which is something that's never happened in the history of the series before. Historically, because you weren't able to pay a current athlete for their NIL, the individual on the cover of the games would be somebody whose eligibility had just completed, or it would be a mascot. It might be a generic, just football player or something. All right, I have a copy of the original Sega Genesis game on my desk. There's a couple of the old PS1 versions where there wasn't really anybody. So they're current athletes. It's not a coach. It's not former athletes. It's not fans, which I think were some reasonable guesses over the past couple of months. They're people that you're going to get to watch play college football this fall.
That cover, first of all, is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
You just have that on hand. That is absolutely electric. Second question to go with that.
Yeah.
In your newsletter, it talks about, different players, different positions from different conferences. Is that a fair assessment that it's going to be, so there's not going to be multiple SEC quarterbacks. It might be a quarterback from one conference and from another conference, it'll be a different position. Is that how it's going to work, we think, or can you tell us that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are multiple covers. There's multiple athletes, and what I can share without getting in trouble here is that those athletes all play different positions, and they come from different power conferences. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there's 4 covers for 4 power conferences. I'm saying that there's multiple athletes, multiple covers, multiple power leagues, but there's only one quarterback. So you could theoretically have a Big 12 quarterback, and then an SEC edge rusher, and then a Big 10 kicker. It's not a Big 10 kicker, but that would be a thing that can be set up here. So you're not going to see multiple versions of quarterbacks.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Now, when it comes to more information, I know everyone's like tugging on your shirt, asking you to tell us the secrets about this game. But EA, when they released that trailer earlier this year, they said, hey, full reveal coming in May. And you and I are recording this at 4:04 Central Time, May 1st. So in case something drops before then, I guess we'll have a different conversation. This is a moot point. But from what you have heard, is there any further information on when that full reveal is coming now that we're in the month of May?
Yeah, what I had been hearing internally was that the middle of May was the target. I shared a specific date in our newsletter a little while ago, but what I've learned, and I think many of our colleagues on this beat have learned, is that plans can change quickly with EA, and you might have a date that's tentatively, like May 15th. And now, they weren't necessarily expecting to have this much chatter about the cover, right now, right? Like I was able to get this information, in a way that their comms team wasn't planning on. And so maybe that expedites the timeline. Maybe it changes it. The expectation that I have from what I had been told is middle of May. And that full reveal is going to be a reveal that is much more focused on answering many of the myriad gameplay and feature specific questions that people have. A lot of what I've been able to learn over the last 2 years, a lot of it's been through open records. It's been through my sources in the licensing industry, with on campus, some of it at EA, but you don't get in trouble for leaking audio assets the same way that you might about leaking information about mascot mode or Road to Glory, right? So there's that's kind of the push and pull of trying to get information about this game.
I was going to say, Matt, when you put out this news on your newsletter, which, quick plug again, Extra Points newsletter, go check it out. Matt crushes all the coverage over there. That's why we're able to have this information we have. You're kind of like the voice of the people here. Like you said, this wasn't something that EA put out this release and said multiple cover athletes. This was Matt Brown, the people's champ, got this for us. So with that being the case, I know there's still more information you can't disclose. But when we put out on our Twitter page hey, we have Matt Brown on the show. What do y'all want to know? I mean, all the questions are like, what about this gameplay? What about Road to Glory? What about Team Builder, conferences, all that? What is the detail or the coolest detail that you are at liberty to share with us when it comes to gameplay?
Yeah, I think a few things that I can share beyond the fact that EA plans to answer a lot of these questions in like 2.5-ish weeks, right? One of the things that I've heard from developers who've been working on this game that's been a priority is this idea of wanting to make the dynasty recruiting mode different, and it is particularly to help. Um, I want to say like less of a grind, but so the player would feel more attached to particular recruits, right? I guess through many of the previous years of this game, lots of people are playing Dynasty mode, but it's their data would show that the majority of those are only 2, 3, 4 years, rather than people necessarily doing a 60-year long Dynasty. And so if there's tweaks that can be made, so like, hey, if you're signing a guy in week 6 and you could see that he runs a 4.240, you want to be excited to play with that guy next year. You want to already be thinking about how you can incorporate that person into different packages. And then you want to have some drama and a sense of reward and success as you go through that process. The other thing that was really reiterated to me, and I think is one of the really fascinating game development questions for this game, is how to make this as realistic and accurate as possible while still being fun. And I think you and many of your colleagues at On3 know better than most what an absolute grind roster management is right now in college football. And I think if we made this game exactly how it is in real life, it wouldn't be fun. It'd be way too hard. We'd all have gray hairs. The game would be texting us at 2:00 in the morning to go text recruits or something. It'd be a mess. So you have to figure out, okay, we want this to be realistic, right? We want to have transfers. We want to have NIL. We want to be able to rebuild your roster beyond just high school recruiting. But where is that slider? Where do you set the line to where it's approachable and accessible and still fun? And I think that's part of what the fine tuning process is, kind of at the end of the development cycle, and where that ends up, I think is going to be fascinating, because that's one of the tricky things about making a good franchise mode in any sports game. How to make it. We don't all have to have master's degrees in salary capology.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Like, I don't want my quarterback week 4 being tampered with, hitting the portal after the year. Like, I'm okay with tampering with someone else's roster, and hopefully that's something that's involved in the game. But I don't want my quarterback dipping for a nice NIL bag. I think EA has alluded to this a little bit as well. Transfer portal, NIL, things like that. We can expect that in the game. Is that fair to say at this point?
Yeah, that's my understanding. What I've been telling people and what's been relayed to me is that college football is a different sport than it was the last time we had this game back in 2013, 2014. And some of those changes are about recruiting and roster management. And it's not just NIL in the transfer portal. Signing limits are different. We have multiple signing days, which we didn't have the last time this game came out. The recruiting through JUCOs looked different than it did back in 2014, and also like the game itself has changed. The rules are a little bit different. RPOs are a much bigger part of a standard college football offense than they were the last time the game came out. How the option is run and how common that is looks a little bit different. The distribution of where recruits are and what kind of recruits there are looks different, and so those are all things that I know the development team is highly tuned into and wanting to make those tweaks, right? Like in previous years, if you played for 10 years because of some bug in the game's logic, Army and Navy regularly became like top 10 programs. And you would regularly see like, here's this 4-star guy out of British Columbia, and there's these 2 white defensive backs out of Vermont, and they're both amazing. And I'm not to say that can't ever happen, right? We've seen and written about great recruits from New Hampshire and South Dakota and everything, but that's not how it typically works, right? And we have better data on how talent distribution and recruiting works now than we did a decade ago, and I would expect that to be reflected in this game.
Yeah, there's so many lifelike components to this game from what we can tell. Like Chris Fowler, even earlier, maybe it was last night or it was earlier today, dropping like, hey, it took me 2 years, 115 plus hours of work to have every single call dialed into this game. Are we going to have multiple broadcast crews from like different networks? It sounds like we have multiple broadcast crews, period. But will it be like, hey, you got Fox here, you got CBS here, you got ESPN here, or is it all ESPN from what we can tell?
It's a great question, and I could definitely like independently confirm ESPN. I think we wrote about the College Game Day crew on Extra Points over a year earlier. I remember I was covering game day out in Montana, and like I asked them, are you going to be in the game? They're like, yeah, we started the recording, and that was even before the game got originally delayed. But because it does take forever to do this, because all of the audio is completely new in this game, right? Like I think that it's worth reiterating. You can't just reskin the last college football game. None of the code, none of the audio, none of the stadium renderings, none of those assets can be used in this game. They had to rebuild everything, which then included a lot of audio recording. I have asked if there are other companies involved with broadcasting, and I have not been told one way or the other. Historically, this game has been an ESPN specific property. Off the top of my head, the only collegiate licensed game that I think had different broadcast networks were some of the early college basketball titles. I can't say that it's not happening, but I have not been able to get a confirmation from anybody at Fox or CBS about their involvement. And I have to think at this point, if they were, they probably would have leaked it to somebody.
Yeah, right. When ESPN is saying, hey, I'm in the game. Like, I was waiting for that Joel Klatt tweet to drop that says, I'm in the game, or Gus Johnson, I'm in the game. So, I guess we'll see when we get more of a full reveal. Yeah, I guess we'll see when we get there. But regardless, Matt, last question for you here. You have already made it very clear you will be playing this game. You've been playing this game for a while, given that copy that you showed us, which is absolutely phenomenal. Are we starting with like a G5 school and building it up? Are we going full dynasty mode with Ohio State? Because I believe that's your alma mater. Like, what's the path forward here for when Matt Brown gets the sticks for the first time?
I don't know about you, but I can't identify with anybody who gets this game and fires up dynasty and thinks, all right, time for Alabama. Like just like you don't play a video game on easy mode, right? I grew up outside of Columbus. I did go to Ohio State, but when I play this, once I figure out the controls, and that might mean me playing online and getting thrown into a dumpster by some middle schoolers, right? Who don't have the same kind of responsibilities that I do. But if I'm doing Dynasty, give me Akron. Give me Kent State. Give me somebody at the bottom of Conference USA and build up from that way. I feel like that's a core part of this game is recruiting 2-stars and trying to out scout somebody to beat Tulane for a kid rather than play with every other built-in advantage. If other people want to do that, like that's fine, but that's not how I enjoy these games.
No, I think you said it perfectly there, Matt. Some people just aren't built for the Eastern Michigan route through the college football playoff and eventually hoisting that national championship and bringing it back to Ypsilanti. Not everybody's built like you and I, Matt. It's too bad, but it's true, and we're going to be able to find out who those people are here very, very soon when that game drops. Really quickly, I think everybody has sort of echoed the sentiment. I know you've reported on it as well in your newsletter. Mid-July is still the expected release date here.
Yeah, I think we're at a point where I wouldn't necessarily put in that PTO request, but I've written this a couple of times, and I've heard this elsewhere that July 19th is the expected date. That can maybe get tweaked a little bit one way or the other, but mid-July is when you should be looking into potentially getting sick for a couple of days.
Yeah, hey, it happens. I hear something's going around middle of July, so hopefully everyone's safe, but we'll see if somebody catches that, and maybe a whole lot of somebody catch that. Matt Brown. Yeah. Extra Points newsletter, the man, the voice of the people when it comes to this game and all the details around it. Appreciate you making time, man. Really excited for this to drop.
No, of course. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.